That story, and it is the first time that Israel's intervened in this way in the ongoing conflict in Syria, which began in 2011. Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called for the operation after requests from the US, some EU nations and also Canada. Well, I'm joined now by the Israeli writer and former IDF soldier and humanitarian officer Hen Mazzig. Very good evening to you. As I was saying there, Israeli involvement is unprecedented. So how significant would you say this is?
I think it's major. I mean, Israel has treated over 4,000 Syrian civilians to date since the beginning of the civil war in Syria. And it's something that Israel does. I mean, we are providing humanitarian aid, but something like that to really send military force to escort civilians out of a war zone and bring them through Israel to Jordan is something that is pretty major. And I think it's a great achievement for Israel and for the world.
And what do you think is likely to happen next? Because we are hearing that a lot of families are still there. They haven't been evacuated. They're still trapped.
Yeah, it's an unbearable situation. I mean, Syria, since the beginning of the civil war, we don't even know which side we want to support. And I think Israel has made it very clear that we're not going to take sides. But when it comes to civilians, this is something that Israel, I mean, from my work as a humanitarian officer, I know that the value of life is the most important thing for us in the IDF. It's part of our code of conduct, and it is for Israel. That's why we are, treating neighboring countries, civilians when they are in need. And I think that the neighboring countries of Israel should learn from it. And there's a need for more support to the Syrian civilians. I mean, Israel and Israeli civil organizations such as IsraAid has been provided humanitarian aid, but Israel can do, and there must be more that has been done internationally.
How was it then that this evacuation all came about?
So according to the reports, it was a request from the US, the EU, and the UK and Canada, several countries that approached Israel and asked for its support. Being part of humanitarian operations during my military service, I know how stressful it can be to go into an area that is a combat zone. And it's not only your life that you have to think about, it's the life of civilians that you need to protect as you are bringing them into Israel. So it's probably one of the most, I think it's even more complicated and more stressful than a situation of a combat when a soldier faces another soldier. And that's why it was done in the middle of the night. That's why it was so secretive. No one knew about it other than the people that were involved. And I'm glad to hear that 800 people were saved by an enemy country. But, it's civilians. That's what matters.
We're talking about the white helmets here who describe themselves as volunteers who go into war zones to help people out, but they're not without controversy, are they? Because the Syrian president himself has suggested that they themselves have terrorist links.
Whatever Bashar al-Assad is saying, I don't think can hold any water. Israel is not about intervening in the Syrian war. It's not about taking political side. And I don't think it's even the question that we need to ask this day. The fact that the White Helmets are a humanitarian organization that has been supporting civilians in Syria. And Israel, when we hear humanitarian case, that's where we help. When human lives are at risk of civilians, that's where we go in and help. We're not going to take sides. But I don't think that's the question we need to discuss in terms of sides in Syria. We all know how chaotic the situation is and how hard it is to take sides.
And then just finally, just talk us through how they managed to become trapped in the first place. What's the situation like there on the ground?
I mean, chaotic. Again, it's especially in this area where they were trapped. I mean, the White Helmets, what they're doing is that, according to reports, is to provide humanitarian aid whenever there's an airstrike. That's why they are in this areas that are known to have air strikes and known to have a lot of violence. And to have 800 people, some of the soldiers that were part of this operation talked about how they saw women and children going through the border to Israel with so much hope in their eyes. So it's truly a humanitarian case and on a humanitarian ground. And I think that's Israel has done something that many other neighboring countries should learn to do and start doing it to support their brothers and sisters, civilians on the other side.
Okay, Hen Mazzig, thank you for your time.
Thank you.